Welcome back to the channel. Today we are installing LED turn signals in the front of your bike with a third cable for running lights. Alright, so often you see bikes with running lights, and in our case with the GSX-S1000, which is just using as an example because this is applicable to many bikes, you can actually install LED turn signals in the front and having running lights as long as you can provide that power for that third cable. So normally you'll have your three cables or two cables just for the power, and then going back to the flasher where it's going to be initiating that flashing whenever you activate your turn signals, and then you have your third cable which is going to help you to give that additional lighting when you're turning on the ignition, and that's just going to be constant light running all the time as soon as you have your key on. So this bike, they don't come with that third light, so you just need to provide a cable or at least the power for that additional cable. So that's what I'm going to be walking you through today. So in case you haven't seen my other videos, I did the turn signals in the rear and then linking that with my braking system with the third light. So instead of having a running light in the rear, I decided to link it to my braking to add additional lighting when I'm braking. And then secondly, I installed a module to make it flash in a different pattern to create some visibility when you're applying your brakes. So now we're moving to the front, replacing my old and dingy turn signals that I had before, and then installing that with the additional benefit of having a running light in the front. So let's just get to it. So for this modification, you're gonna need LED lights, cable stripper, some heat shrink, your light tester, and a heat gun. So as usual, you're gonna start by removing the cover by undoing the two 4mm hex bolts, and then you're gonna do the same with the same 4mm tool to remove the other two, so you can remove entirely the whole headlight nest. And I always like to put the bolts back where they go so I can, avoid, losing them. Because the headlight is gonna be resting on the fender, I'm just gonna put a little rag to, hold the weight and avoid any scratches. Your situation is probably gonna be different, but in my case, I had already removed the two turn signals and the connection, so I had them all the way back, just taped, and at this point they were just open, so they were not even connected to the actual turn signals. So in this case, I'm just gonna go ahead and put a tester so I can make sure and remind myself which of the two cables is the one's gonna be giving the signal. And as you can tell, I turn on the bike, I put my tester on the bolt in the bike, and I turn on the turn signals, and that is showing me the signal is getting from that cable. Now with the cables identified, I'm bringing the LED light just so I can give it a test before I proceed to the installation. At this point, I'm showing the three cables we briefly talked about at the beginning of the video. So black and red, these are the two that you normally use for your turn signals, and I'm just gonna do a quick connection here just to ensure that the LED light is working, and then we'll take a look at the blue one, which is the one we're gonna be using as an option for the running lights. Throughout the video, you'll see that I like to, test my connections a lot, just so I can ensure that when I'm done, I'm really done and not really, having something that's, poorly connected or not working. So at this point, I'm testing the turn signals. So it seems like we identified the cables; those are working, and the unit is actually working as well. Now, the red one works as a positive, or the blue one, I'm sorry, it works as a positive. So I have it turning on at the same time. If you saw it, that white one is gonna be the one that's gonna stay. I was just doing a quick test just so I know it's working. And I already identified this plug here, which I'm gonna show from the schematic. That is that when you put your key on, it actually gets constant power. So this is the connector I'm going to be using to intervene, so I can provide 12 volt to the running lights. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and remove some of the shielding or the protection on the cable, insulation on the cable, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it, and this is where I'm going to be providing 12 volt to the running lights. At this point, I'm just gonna go ahead and start working on removing the original turn signals. In case you're wondering, these are from a Ducati 696 that I used to have. They were LED already, they were working before, but they kind of got a little bit old, which is why I stopped using them. And I'm just gonna go ahead and install the new ones. Okay, so this is when I noticed that the new threaded part of the turn signal is not gonna work. So I just pulled my drill and I made the hole a little bit bigger by just measuring and measuring the threaded part with the drill bit. And at this point, I filed it just to make it clean, and now you saw it. You just went through without any hesitation or problem. So I think we're good to go to do the installation. So hopefully you don't have to do this, but since these are universal turn signals, so often you might need to do some small modifications here and there just to make it fit. Okay, so now what's pending is just to run that knot through all the cabling, just so I can put it inside of the bike, or the inside part of the turn signals, so I can thread it and then just put the turn signals in place. With one of the LEDs installed, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut the cables, because I'm not gonna be using those connectors. I will be soldering, or actually using those strips that I've been using, that they solder at the same time they act as a heat shrink. So I'm just gonna getting my cables ready, so exposing some of the cables so I can go ahead and start making the final and permanent connections. Okay, with the cables exposed, now I'm in the point where I'm just bringing my heat shrink things, where they solder at the same time they act as a heat shrink. Just picking the sizes that I'm going to be using. At least I need 2 for this connection, so I'm just getting ready to do that right now. Okay, so I have both cables connected, or establishing the connections right here. Remember, you have to put the heat shrink before you go ahead and do the connection, so that you can slide it through once the cables are joined or connected. So at this point, just as a reminder, we're still dealing with the black and the red. I'm still not working with the running light. I'm still providing power as well as ground for the 2 connections. So even before using the heat gun to shrink the material, I'm turning the bike on just to give it a quick test. And as you can tell, connection is working. So now I know that I can just move ahead and do this connection permanently. Okay, so with the help of the heat gun, or you can use maybe open flame if you want to, or maybe some sort of other source, you can just heat it up, and then slowly the material in the middle is gonna start to melt, and then just solder pretty much the cables together, as well as shrinking the other materials, just so you can do a super strong connection. I keep moving the heat gun because I don't want to keep applying heat on one particular direction to avoid melting any other components of the bike. And as you can tell, I'm a little bit paranoid, but with the 2 connections now done, just go ahead and give it another try, and it's working again. So I know I can move on safely to my next part of the process. Alright, so with the flashing portion of the LED turn signals running and working, and finally, completely permanently installed, I'm gonna go ahead and move to the running lights. So I'm just bringing a piece of cable, just so I can do kind of like an extension to run it through the other source of power that we're going to be using. So now this is just a testing time, where I'm just connecting the cables to ensure that this is a good place and it's actually going to be working as expected. So if you remember earlier, I split the cable when I found that plug that is not being used, and now I put it temporarily just so I know I'm actually getting power to both of the turn signals, specifically to the portion of the running light for both of them. So what I decided to do is to take that blue cable that I brought or added to the mix of this installation, and then just use a single cable that's going to be kind of like splitting in a Y, just to provide the power to both of the turn signals. And that's just going to be running, I guess, if you can call it in parallel, just providing power to both of them. And this is and just to make sure this connection is separate from the power that's going to the turn signal function of the turn signals, the LED turn signals, because these is just going back to the original plug that it's used in the bike. Alright, so now, like I said before, I'm getting ready to test the left side turn signal functionality, and now just give it a try to bring in or connecting the power to the running lights going from the plug to the left side. As you can tell, I just turn on the ignition, and you can see like the running lights are working. And now I'm just gonna give it a try to the turn signals on the left. Cables are connected correctly, so now I know which ones are going to be the ones I'll be using. So now I'm getting ready to make that connection permanent. So what I have in my hands here is when I installed the LED turn signals the first time on my bike a few years ago, I cut the cables too close to the actual harness or plug to the turn signals, which I wanted to retain. So I'm just exposing cable so that I can plug it in place and then start, making the final connection with the heat shrink as well as with the material that's gonna be soldering or linking or joining those two cables together. So I'm just gonna apply heat right now just to make that a permanent connection again. I wanted to apply the heat in camera just so for those of you who haven't seen this before, so this will help people with maybe abilities, or maybe you don't have a soldering gun, or maybe you just don't want to solder. In soldering is great, but this is also a great option. So if you wanna simplify things, you can get one of these, and you can probably see that's already melting and it's adhering to the cable, or at least shrinking against the cables. And like I said before, I repeat the process on the negative side, putting the shrink materials, are now connecting the actual plug. And now I'm just gonna turn on the bike to test that it's working, and as you can tell, I can hit the turn signals, it's working, and now the only thing missing is just to connect that final running lights on the left side as well. Right, so I'm wrapping up the connection to provide power to the LED lights, specifically the running lights. So as I mentioned before, I used a plug that is not being used. In the schematic is shown as an option. So I just tapped into power. So I provided two cables, and one of the two cables, each of them is actually running and being connected to the blue cable, which is the third cable on each of the turn signals. So from power to that, and then the actual negative is still using the negative from the connection on the existing connection on the turn signals. And then just for reference, I just decided to put a label on top of the harness, just so I know that hey, this is the cable that I use for a DRL. So in case in the future I forget what exactly was that for, then this is just an easy reminder for me. Or if I ever sell this bike, if anyone wants to buy it, and then they can probably tell, okay, cool, this is the reason why they stripped this cable and why this connection is here. Okay, so at this point I'm adding a little bit of electrical tape. I finished with both of my connections, so at this point I just want to make them clean, and then just add a little bit of peace of mind with the tape, just to ensure that these cables are never going to be rubbing and creating any shorts in the system. And then a couple like zip ties, and you should be good to go. And then the reversal, or the process to install your light back, is the same process as you removed it before. So you're just gonna be putting the tabs on the headlight that are at the bottom on the frame of the bike, and then from there you're just gonna push back until you line up with the screws, and then you install it all the way. Alright, this is a quick view of the bike, how it looks at night. So now you can tell LED running lights are running with my main headlight. Alright, so I think that was pretty easy. So of course, depending on the type of turn signals that you get, you can still get the two cable ones, and then you can use this as a tutorial for how to install them. And then if you decide to go for the one with the three cables, now you know when you can tap that into that power, so that you can have more visibility and running lights if you want to. So the ones that I use, they give you the option to choose what type of lighting you want to be using. For example, I chose to do white for the front, and then red for the rear for the running lights. So you can choose and pick and choose the ones you want to use. There's multitude of different options you can find either on Amazon or any other shops where you can find just any electronic stuff for bikes. Alright, so I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you consider subscribing, that would be amazing. If you consider sharing this channel with people that can benefit from this type of modifications, that would be awesome as well. Keep in the loop and subscribe so you can see more in projects that I'm coming with in the next couple of days, specifically maybe new stuff that I'm getting, probably. Yeah, anyway, you'll see it soon. So hopefully you found it entertaining, and I hope to see you soon.